Hey, welcome to our /MaliciousCompliance. We have 4 stories today. Thank you for subscribing, and I hope you enjoy. Story 1. I don't know that person. Not quite sure if this is malicious enough for here, but it used to make me chuckle when it happened. A few years ago, I worked outbound debt collection for a phone company. It's one of the few jobs I would never do again, as making the same call, a few hundred times a shift, was soul-destroying, but hey, it paid the bills when I was between things I actually wanted to do. Early on in the call, I had to establish who I was talking to, and ask some simple security questions before I went into why I was calling, and tried to extract at least some of their overdue bill from them. Something that happened at least once a week, if not more often, was someone would answer and tell me they had no idea who I was calling about, i.e., they didn't know the person named on the contract. The process that we had to comply with, if they were adamant they didn't know the person on the contract, was to mark their line as potentially stolen and block all calls, text, and data, so that the only number they went through to was customer services, where they had to go through a much more rigorous identification process, and then probably pay off their debt to have their line unblocked. If they failed that, they had to go into store, which several did, with photo ID to get it sorted. The best part for us was that anything they paid within a certain time of talking to us went towards our targets, so invariably we got a chunk of value counted, as they wanted their phone to work again. End of Story 1. Now let's move. Story 2. Client said she wanted her website to show the best interior design service. Love this sub, so thought I'd post a story from about 12 years ago. At university, I designed websites to make some extra cash and pay for tuition/rent, etc. I got pretty good at it, and had a great network of clients around London. One day, I was introduced to a lady, we'll call her Debbie, who ran an interior design agency in West London. I put the speech marks there, because all of her clients were her friends, or friends of her husband. She was extremely wealthy, lived in a house on Warwick Avenue, in Maida Vale, and had a chauffeur on call. All of her money derived from her husband, who seemed very sketchy. She also had these 2 sons, who just sat around the house all day smoking weed, despite being in their late 20s. Anyway, I designed a website for her, which she was very pleased with. Her exact brief was, I want this website to show the best interior design service in London. I quoted the price, she agreed, and I built it, but then when it came time to pay, she suddenly started complaining that the website wasn't quite right, despite being live, and generating lots more traffic than before. She refused to pay, and stopped answering my calls. What she didn't realize was that I owned the domain name, and could legally do whatever I wanted with it. So I redirected it to her closest competitor, a nearby interior design agency, run by a rival of hers she hated. Within 6 hours, I got a phone call from her, going ballistic that her website was broken, and that it had to be fixed ASAP. I explained that I couldn't really do anything, but vaguely suggested that if she stumped up some cash, then maybe I could do something. I won't repeat the name she called me, but the next morning, my account was credited with the money. I never bothered to change the domain back, and blocked her number after that. The site is still live to this day. End of Story 2. Now let's move. Story 3. So, you want to be informed after every customer transaction. I'm pretty sure that, if I asked for a show of hands, how many of y'all had that one manager, or boss that was the worst at micromanaging, roughly 80 to 85% of you guys would raise your hand. Quick disclaimer. On mobile, so forgive any wonky formatting. Anyhow, a few years back, I used to work retail at a brick-and-mortar shop owned by a guy that, well, let's just say that, if we left him alone, the place would fall apart within minutes. There was myself, 2 other associates, and 2 assistant managers, one of whom bought the business out, turned it into an online shop, and is doing pretty well for himself, but I digress. Said owner had no clue how our inventory system worked, let alone our POS system. Nightmare, I know. But absolutely insisted that he knew everything about the place, inside and out, and threatened you with unemployment whenever things didn't go his way. One day, I called his bluff and walked. Not 30 minutes later, while I was sitting in a nearby park, did he call me, begging for me to come back, squeezed a sizable raise out of him in the process. Now, all of that to this, the meat of this little bit of malicious compliance. Said know-it-all owner was so convinced of his hype that he insisted/demanded that we call him after every customer transaction, go over what was said, so he could tell us where we went wrong, even after upselling and setting up a delivery account. Mind you, this is in the Upper West Side of Manhattan, where it's busy for roughly 5 out of the 8 hours during any given shift. Cue the malicious compliance. Despite a line of customers at my register, I had to stop things, pick up the phone, and make the call, all while my line of customers, in what would be typical New York levels of patience, would drop their stuff and walk out. The ones that stuck around waited the 5, maybe 10 minutes each phone call. It got so bad, at one point, one of my regulars, whom everyone knows to at least the 2nd degree points if you could guess who, grabbed the receiver and proceeded to lay into know-it-all owner about how he's losing business because of his asinine policy. Owner dug in his heels, though, bless his heart, and insisted that things be done his way. All right, bet. I tried to keep the convo's receiver only, now it's been upgraded to speakerphone. Now everyone in the store, and I do mean everyone, can hear how much of a colossal douche he was. Business that was once about $5,000 a day in store sales dropped to just north of $1,500 while deliveries, while at about $6,000 a day, dropped to roughly half that. With online reviews being the most hilarious I've read since I started working retail/customer service decades ago, know-it-all owner was forced to give up on his policy, eventually announcing his retirement a few months later and selling to the assistant manager I mentioned earlier. It's something we still joke about years later in our occasional catching-up sessions. Hey, remember that time know-it-all demanded us that we call him after every transaction? Yeah, I laughed in his face about it. He didn't like me much after. End of story 3. Now let's move to our last story for today. Story 4. Sometimes you just do what the customer wants. One of my employees accidentally sent out the wrong item on an internet sale. Person was more than just pissed. We offered a return at our expense, and will ship the correct item ASAP, and original shipping would be refunded. But no, that wasn't good enough for this person. Told me I should fire Steve for this. Steve, not his real name, had made a simple mistake, and things happen, because we were in the busy time of the year. Now this was 2 weeks before Christmas, and I finally replied to this angry customer. Dear customer, thank you. I appreciate your insistence that action be taken in this case. I had been building a case to remove Steve from the company for some time, and this helps me seal the deal. You aren't the first person to tell me this. Thanks to your complaint, I have given Steve his walking papers. He was very upset. He even cried a little bit, and asked after 4 years how I could be so heartless to fire him 2 weeks before Christmas, and that he was the only source of income for his family with 2 kids and disabled wife. I simply told him he pissed off the wrong customer. Sorry, Steve, but Santa won't be visiting your kids this year. Oh, and Steve, sorry, but you no longer qualify for your year-end bonus. I thanked the customer, because his complaint was gonna save the company a lot of money, and as a reward I was making his $8 purchase totally free. Customer sent back a very long email, where he profusely apologized over and over to the point they must have been crying at the computer while typing it out. They were shocked and stunned I would fire someone just before Christmas, and had this attitude that it was a good thing. They literally begged me to hire him back. Well, Steve and I had a good laugh reading what this angry customer wrote. I saved the letter, and over the next 2 years sent it out twice more. Steve was not only a good employee, who was honest and caring, I also considered him a friend. Give the people what they want, and suddenly they realize they are the monster they hate the most. End of story 4. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please consider subscribing if you already haven't. Have a great day.